From disappearances to accidentally picking up criminals and all of the absurdities in between, it is very clear that hitchhiking isn't for everyone.
So get cozy and ready to be absolutely creeped out as we cover the top 10 scary hitchhiker stories that will terrify you. First up, in our number 10 spot, we have the nice couple. One night, a man was hitchhiking across the US and he got into a car with a couple. They seemed pretty nice, nothing out of the ordinary. Not a long while though, after when the man had gotten home, he saw the couple on the news. Apparently they had killed a man earlier that day and they were driving with a corpse in the car. Not only that, but they had robbed and killed a few men prior to this day, leaving this man with his mouth hanging open. This is why I have never and will never hitchhike.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Cousin. This is a story that comes from Reddit user Gruselig, and it is a story about their cousin. Basically, back in the 70s, their aunt's eldest son was known to hitchhike quite a bit throughout New Brunswick. One summer, unfortunately, however, he ended up going missing. To this day, he has still never been found despite police investigations. It is believed that the most likely case is that he was doing his regular thing of hitchhiking, but ended up getting into the car of someone who had terrible, sinister intentions. They believe that he likely got in the car of someone who ended up taking his life, and they believe that they may have placed his body in the St. John River. The storyteller heard this story many times growing up from their mother in order to discourage them from taking up the practice themselves. I think it's safe to say that it probably worked.
Next up, in our number 8 spot, we have the Walmart hitchhiker. This is another one that makes me shake in my booties, and I'm not even wearing booties. This is a story that happened to a friend of mine. 90s babies? Please, someone for the love of God get this reference. This is a story about a sweet old man named Henry who lived in the same town as the Reddit user who told the story. So first off, that just makes this way more frightening. It's one thing to hear these stories, but to know someone firsthand, terrifying. Anyways, he was known to be genuinely sweet and caring, and so you can imagine the shock it brought to the town to hear what happened to him. One night, he picked up a hitchhiker just outside of town. He apparently told the hitchhiker to jump in the bed of the truck and that he would drive him to the closest Walmart. But of course, as you can probably tell where the story is going, the hitchhiker proceeded to shoot the old man in the back of the head for no reason at all. Yep, after further investigation, the hitchhiker didn't steal anything, so there is seemingly no reason. Henry thankfully did not die from this, as you would think, but he did suffer major brain damage and he is sadly permanently disabled. Is it possible that this sweet old man had enemies? Or do you think he actually was shot for no reason? Leave a comment below and let us know what you think.
In our number 7 spot today, we have He Was a Nice Guy. This story comes from the Reddit user Raccoon Yeti Kiwi, and they explain that this hitchhiking story starts off when they were in the car with their dad driving. Their dad stopped to pick up a hitchhiker, but when you hear how this guy looked, you'll be just as confused as I am as to why they stopped to pick this man up. They explained that he was picked up while it was raining, that this man had long hair that covered his eyes, and that he was carrying an axe. I don't know, I wouldn't, would you? Turns out though, the guy was super polite. They just dropped him off where he needed to go, no questions asked, everyone was all good. Maybe he was just a nice guy and didn't realize how menacing carrying an axe was. I don't know.
Coming up in our number 6 spot today, we have The Clown. As the story goes, a teacher that lived in Cook County, Illinois, was walking around his town when he was offered a ride home by, as he described, a largish man. While driving, he noticed a clown suit and a giant makeup kit in the back seat. When he inquired about it, the man said that he was a part-time clown. Naturally, why else would you have a clown suit in your car? Well, a few years later, this teacher found out that this man was actually John Wayne Gacy Jr. Yep, the clown murderer himself. I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend that was so scared of clowns, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what a baby. But now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, hell nah. They're very creepy. Apologies to any clowns watching Hollywood and Murderers Have Done You Dirty. I'm sure you're nice people.
In our number 5 spot today, we have I Didn't Know. So this story comes from someone who has a hitchhiking background. Like, they used to hitchhike in their youth, and now themselves they've begun picking up hitchhikers. You know, they get the lifestyle is all I'm trying to say. So fast forward to current times, this story is one that they recall as their strangest hitchhiking experience, and it's one where they're picking up a stranger, as one does. So basically, he picked up this guy who was walking in the middle of the desert, apparently while he was doing long haul trucking. It was the time of year where the weather is just just absolutely unforgiving, and that's definitely part of the reason why he picked this guy up. So he picks him up, the guy gets in, and together they travel for about 300 miles before they end up getting pulled over by the police. After being pulled over, this guy ends up getting arrested. Turns out that this guy had some sort of warrant, and the storyteller almost got charged with aiding and abetting a criminal. In the end, especially since he was a completely innocent third party, the storyteller ended up getting sent off on his way, and apparently the hitchhiker was also released not too long later. Wonder what he got arrested for.
In our fourth spot today, we have the tough brother. This story is told by the victim's brother. Apparently one night his brother picked up a hitchhiker after a long night of drinking. Probably the worst time to pick up a hitchhiker, am I right? Out of nowhere, the hitchhiker pulled out a and proceeded to tell the brother that he was stealing his car. The brother was quite tough and into heavy lifting and such, and so he thought, he could take him. He then tackled the hitchhiker, only to be shot in the bicep. A big chunk of his bicep was blown off. The hitchhiker was caught by the cops, hooray, but unfortunately, the brother can no longer do heavy lifting.
In our number 3 spot today, we have a close call. This is a Reddit story that comes from the user A Brutal Cow, and they wrote, quote, "Not my story, but my dad's. He was traveling through Arizona on his way to Mexico. He looked to the side of the road and saw a man hitchhiking. My dad pulled over and asked where this guy is going, to which the man said, the next town over. My dad, being a very trusting man, and this being the 70s or 80s, decided he would give him a ride. While they were driving, they started talking and my father asked for his name. His name was Derp. My dad, quite shocked, looked at him and replied, holy crap, that's my name. They had a few small conversations, and at the next town, my dad let him out and continued to Mexico. He eventually reached the border. He pulled up and the border official asked to see his license. He took a good long look at his license. The official then took off his big aviator sunglasses and told him to pull over to the side. My dad got out of the car and they put him in a room while they searched his car. In the end, the dad was sitting in a room waiting for the next few hours, and when the officer walked back in, he received quite a shock. The officer apologized for the long wait and then explained that the man that this dad had picked up had a warrant out for his arrest. The dad asked what the warrant was for, and the officer replied, homicide.
Coming up in our second spot today, we have the You Are Pretty Man. Okay, this story is such a cause for anxiety for me as it deals with potential assault, and this is the first reason I would never pick up a hitchhiker. The second would obviously be fear of being murdered, naturally. The story is told by a woman who is reflecting on her experience of being 18 and driving home from her lunch break. She spotted a 50-year-old man looking to hitchhike, and her first instinct was to ignore him. But then guilt flooded upon her as she remembered her mom and how she would always stop to help people. So she turned around and asked the man if he needed help. He immediately thanked her and said he had some groceries and meat that he didn't want to go bad, so he was very grateful for her. He asked her to drop him off at the post office nearby. So she began driving, and it wasn't even a minute before she noticed that he was just staring at her. Alarms went off in her head. He blurted out, "You sure are pretty," and then proceeded to ask her for her number. She told him no, and that she has a boyfriend, but he continued to persist. She asked him to please stop, but he got more and more aggressive. She slammed on her brakes and yelled, "Is it too much to ask for a little good karma every now and then? Get out of my car, you cad." Yes, she said cad. He must have been taken aback by the reaction, but he ended up staring blankly at her and proceeded to get out of the car, much to her surprise. He forgot his groceries, and there was actually no meat in them, which just creeped her out even more. I was sure the story was going to have a much worse ending than that, but still super nerve-wracking for anyone to have to endure.
In our number 1 spot today, we have kindness goes a long way. Okay, so this is actually a wild story, and it happened to someone's friend who is named Nikki. Apparently, Nikki is just one of those insanely sweet people who is just like a ray of sunshine and lives her life with kindness first. That is exactly what led her to one day pick up a hitchhiker. Apparently, this guy was a little shy at first, but was extremely polite, and throughout their trip, the two got to talking and actually got on pretty well. They ended up taking a pit stop at one point to grab dinner, and she happily paid for them both. Apparently, when she paid, he seemed a little flustered and awkward, but part of their conversation was about how he was pretty strapped for cash, hence the reason he was hitchhiking in the first place, and since she wasn't in the same boat, she had no problem treating them both. When she dropped him off, he asked Nikki for her phone number so that potentially sometime in the future they could catch up. She excitedly passed her number along, stoked at the idea of one day being able to catch up with this new friend. After about a week since she dropped him off, Nikki did receive a phone call from her new driving friend. This guy says to her on the phone that she should should be glad she was raised to be so kind, because when he initially got in the car, he was planning on killing her and stealing her car. Once he got in and saw how kind she was, and with her buying him dinner and all of that, he just couldn't bring himself to go through with it. He finished off this terrifying conversation by saying, quote, "Please, please, Nikki, please, never ever pick up another hitchhiker." He then hung up and she was never able to get into contact with this man ever again since he called her from a payphone. Safe to say, she probably heeded that advice. Guys, that's all of the scary stories we have for today. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I've been one of your hosts today, Olivia Kozlowski.
And I'm Melissa Melotti, and thanks so much for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.